In this one, I'm talking about how the so-called freedom fighters are actually working in the direction of the biodigital convergence and what that is. So, Brad's accomplishments extend far beyond the freedom movement. This is Brad Kerrigan of the New Federation Party. They act as a supposed alternative to Wexit, which is an Alberta separatist party that Tamara Leach was a part of. Brad has been in federal politics, exposing issues most apparently would not talk about. I don't know about that. Has he talked about the biodigital convergence? Yeah, he's also built financial and tech companies and wrote a world-class musical production. And he's collaborated with musicians, including Juno and Grammy winners. And he's used his position to raise awareness about social issues, including child poverty, homelessness, genuine environmental issues. And he's authored a book and documentary film while showcasing his multifaceted insights and visionary qualities on U.S. cable TV. Under the current de facto Canadian government, all the attributes of sovereignty of the Canadian and tribal peoples have been usurped and transferred to foreign corporate interests and entities. This power, claiming to act on behalf of Canadians, actually only acts in their place. With your assistance, we can unite and embark on a fresh beginning with a new federation for and by the people. Well, you're using direct democracy, as we can see here. So the thing is direct democracy is quite literally like a path to tyranny, and I'm going to read this bit of the article and then perhaps implement some of my 2 cents. Fortunately, this is an article from 2016, actually, that talks about what they call electronic ID, right? And it involves the World Economic Forum. Fortunately, help is on its way. The UN and World Bank have a goal to deploy electronic identities for all humanity by 2030. With electronic identities, one can easily verify the person who is on the internet and have confirmed identity, and therefore eventually support freedom of assembly on the internet. And then following it, we will also hopefully be able to form internet democracy. But what kind of democracy should the internet follow? The internet does not have the size and distance limitations that require representative democracy. On the other hand, everyone voting on everything all the time, although technically possible, is not practical. So which way should the internet go? So this picture here, it takes direct plus representative democracy. So apparently in Canada you have what they call a representative democracy, which is where everybody does vote and submit their vote to a representative, which is actually someone who's selected, but that's besides the point. They're the ones that are supposed to basically do what people supposedly vote on. Although with a direct democracy, the people themselves are forming not petitions per se. I can't remember the exact word offhand, but kind of like a similar premise to a petition, but people basically make the policies and then everybody decides to vote on them. And so it's like giving the illusion of the citizens being like part of the governing infrastructure instead of taking things to a representative. Although with this kind of idea, direct plus representative democracy equals delegative democracy. I'm going to explain what this is. It's a new form of democracy emerging now on the internet, which is a hybrid of representative and direct democracy in which people can either vote directly or delegate their vote to someone else they trust. Vote delegation can be once or ongoing, and they can always be revoked or overwritten. It requires very complex software and algorithms to do it. What's the internet for if not that? So with this, like, delegative democracy is basically like introducing a social credit score more or less, and or also, you know, the idea that you can turn on and off someone's ability to say vote or even purchase something, considering they want to streamline avenues of industry into a digital realm, right? And then also take that a step further into a bio-digital realm, which we will be getting to that. But however, the point is that these people want to fuse biological life and anything with digitalization involved as well. They want to fuse those two kinds of concepts together, and that's where you get the term biodigital convergence, which is still famously made by Policy Horizons Canada. I've spoke about them in prior videos, and people can take a look at James Scott, who introduced me to this term, and as well to Policy Horizons Canada. So I'm going to be talking about because this whole thing, the biodigital convergence, is a very big rabbit hole that goes in several directions, and so direct democracy is one of the ways of streamlining people to that, because that would require some kind of electronic system for everybody to interact and take part of some kind of system. So that's where blockchain technology comes into play, but we'll move there. So this is What's Up Canada and Wayne Peters over here, who seems to have a lot of different videos, interviewed a lot of different people, and loves the QR codes apparently. Spoke about that in a prior video, but this logo over here, this Buy Me a Coffee, we're going to talk about that in a bit too. But with Wayne Peters here, he has Looking Glass Media, right? And these are all the people that are affiliated with Looking Glass Media. You got Chuck Black, Sean Newman, Shadow Davis, Mag Americans, etc., Bright Light News, Iron Will Report. And so here it says, at the core of this platform was created to support both a free-thinking, unhindered news and free media ecosystem and its users, a place where seekers of truth and genuine thought-provoking information can find the people they choose to spend their time with in a simplified ease of access to ensure you never miss a notification again. All proceeds of Buy Me a Coffee contributions go directly to the content creators to help them to contribute doing what they do best, share truth with us. Thank you for your support. You may not be able to contribute financially, but you can pass this resource to your friends. Yeah, whatever. And this is, of course, a What's Up Canada initiative, which is Wayne Peters. So we're going to talk about this Buy Me a Coffee thing and what that actually means. So when we started Buy Me a Coffee in 2017, our goal was to remove all the complexities and give creators a simple way to get paid and connect with their fans. But simple wasn't enough. Creators needed a product that was meaningful and enjoyable to use. This meant designing a payment platform that doesn't feel transactional, starting with the name itself. Where'd the idea come from? Our founders, Gijo Sunny, or Kiho Sunny, I can't pronounce that, apologies, and Joseph Sunny were creators who lived on a moderate advertising income from their creative gigs, although $500 per month is what you pay for a gym membership in San Francisco. It's enough to make a living in many parts of the world. If it weren't for those AdSense checks, there would be no Buy Me a Coffee. Well, okay, so here's a picture of the guy's name I couldn't pronounce, Gijo Sunny or whatever. And then you have here just this entire interview, which people can take a look at themselves if they'd like. But he gets asked, do you think the gig economy will only grow from here? Is Buy Me a Coffee a kind of bet on the future of work in that way? We're going to talk a little bit about the gig economy. It says, nobody really knows what the future of work will look like, but people like flexibility and people like creating things and, if possible, monetizing what they create. Even for something like Uber with reports about exploiting drivers, when I ask drivers what they think about their job, they are genuinely happy that they have this option and the flexibility to do it whenever they want. So I think the gig economy is here to stay, and so is the creative economy. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the blockchain, considering this is the platform that would need to be that would be implemented using, like, the blockchain goes hand in hand with Web3 based software, and as well it will be, being that the blockchain is like a giant ledger system of sorts, this is what would be ample for something that they would present as direct democracy as well. So it says we need for people to understand blockchain transcripts are one part of a much larger agenda tied to a global economic reboot. The goal of the World Economic Forum is to create a literal Internet of Bodies using 5G, soon 6G, and smart city Internet of Things sensors. When people are linked to blockchain via COVID biometric health passports or education transcripts, the result will be the same. We are crossing the threshold not just into surveillance capitalism, but into full-on biocapitalism. Our bodies mine for data that will run massive future markets in human capital. They need blockchain identity, and they need it brought to scale. However, until that happens, there's still time to change course and fight for a humane economic system that respects all children of the earth and future generations. So yeah, they would need to have CRISPR-based technologies and Web3 software in order to have people amalgamated with the blockchain, or rather the ball and chain, if you will. So blockchain will not empower people, it will turn them into digital commodities secured on ledgers. The plan is for us to be scored, sifted, and sorted in a brutish program of fierce competition and precariousness. Make no mistake, the oligarchs value the reliability of robots over the cunning of humans. Universal basic income and digital vouchers for education, housing and healthcare poison applies, not quote-unquote solutions meant to help the masses. Blockchain is a deception. If we take the bait, we'll end up playable characters in an augmented reality game of life cooked up by the CIA and defense contractors to benefit hedge funds. Webinar on that here, don't fall for it. And yeah, that's very true, couldn't have said it better, and this is a very good article, by the way. Once again, thank you, James Scott. I think I found this through your page, if I'm honest. So here are some things to know about the blockchain. I'll read about 3 points, and I'd suggest going through this article yourselves in case there are things I miss. So blockchain provides the quote-unquote trust infrastructure that the billionaire class needs to advance globalization 4.0. The next era of globalization will revolve around platform, service, and knowledge work, and eventually telepresence, labor, employing remote control robotics. For additional information, read this interview with economist Richard Baldwin on the impact of globalization and robotics in white-collar jobs. This is the fourth industrial revolution. This is the WEF's Global Economic Reset. I'm going to try not to say that certain C word from now on. So, yeah, and this is an interesting one, an interesting video presented by Richard Baldwin himself. And number 2, it says the labor force will be reduced to atomized skill sets so artificial intelligence can efficiently sort individuals to meet the rapidly changing needs of free market digital labor. Low-wage micro-work contracts will be offered to those with the highest reputation scores. In the U.S., jobs have been assigned skill codes by the Department of Labor. The system, managed by ONET, will be the basis for the regional planned economies laid out in the Workforce Opportunities and Innovation Act guidelines. Below are excerpts from the Regional Workforce Plan for Southeast Pennsylvania, where the writer of this article lives, I think. A high growth area will be the gig economy. Most jobs will pay substandard wages that will not allow families to maintain a decent standard of living in a high-cost urban housing market. Okay, so the gig economy is all part of the transfer to a new system, essentially. And the Davos crowd envisions the future of work as a vast TaskRabbit economy where people from around the world compete against one another on digital platforms in real time. Blockchain transcripts will be needed to sift and sort children and workers based on demonstrated standardized skills. This is the trust part. Almost all professions will lack stability, benefits, and retirement opportunities. Those in power imagine a day when no bricks and mortar schools remain. Children instead acquire skills Pokemon Go style in community-based settings like museums. They call these learning ecosystems or cities of learning, where knowledge acquisition must be performed on a digital device for it to be made discoverable as a blockchain credential and used as impact data to fuel human capital bond markets. Read about this vision in the Ford Foundation-backed white paper, Building the Future of Education Museums and the Learning Ecosystem from 2014. Screenshot below states today's schools are not preparing children for this planned gig economy. So, yeah, of course. And then here basically it mentions that the gig economy is going to be the one that they're basically pushing in order to basically have people running around like rabbits competing against each other in a sort of digital ecosystem, if you will. And then that doesn't even really factor in the biological aspect of that, which essentially, like I mentioned, CRISPR technology, which was developed, I think, by the CCP, but with this kind of stuff that basically alters DNA, and edits genetic sequencing, genetic code. What ends up happening is the DNA strands become like the blockchain nodes, if you will. So that's some dystopian sci-fi sounding type of stuff that unfortunately these people would love to make into a reality. And the quote unquote, I can't use the actual word, but what they tried to force on people in the time through medical coercion, if you will, that's really just a sideshow and a divisive tool for people. And ultimately, the agenda is the biodigital convergence, and nanotechnology exists in a lot of things besides that particular product. So anyway, this right here is an article about the digital twin, but here I'm pulling up a picture of Jeffrey or Jeremy Gibson's digital avatar here, and his digital puppies, I guess. So this is his, I guess, real face, if you will. The reason why I'm bringing up Jeremy Gibson here is just because a lot of people have asked him about the biodigital convergence, and it seems apparent that he is ignoring people, from what I gather. And if Jeremy would like to dispute this, I would happily talk to him. But I think as well it would probably be better if he spoke to James Scott, as he is somebody more knowledgeable in this subject than I am. So Jeremy also is like, it says brand ambassador at Second Class Citizen, which is like a clothing line. So anyway, this guy Mario Lopez just took a screenshot on Facebook. Another freedom fighter turns out to be a shill, dropping like flies off the solid list, that's for sure. This guy is straight up denying the biodigital convergence and refuses to discuss it with his followers because it won't earn him any money from his hustles in the freedom movement. He's even blocked other folks trying to raise the alarm about this, so I went and found him and called him on it. Laugh reacts and attempting to insult, so I blocked the clown and took a page out of his playbook. Man, when you've been at this shit since 2020 or so, you start to see that almost all the spearheads of any grassroots movements that emerge out of tyranny eventually become compromised or outright shills. That's the controlled opposition that always comes because most people are too complacent. Our Creator will hold them all to account of that, I have no doubt at all. So yeah, and apparently Jeremy can't even spell the word shill, but I think he definitely should, address this subject. And there's a reason why I pulled up Kelly's Asman Pass, but I'll get to that. So Destination Earth. So the reason why I'm bringing up the digital twin here is because when you create those stupid avatars on Facebook or whatever social media platform, you're basically creating the digital twin for yourself, is what you're doing. So, Destination Earth, for which the operational capacity building is funded from the Digital Europe program, aims to develop a high-precision digital model of the Earth to monitor and simulate natural phenomena and related human activities as part of European Commission's Green Deal and the Digital Strategy. Destination Earth will contribute to achieving the objectives of the twin transition, green and digital. So there you go. As part of the buildup of Destination Earth, continuous preparatory scientific and technical developments need to be carried out to ensure integration of new digital twins covering new areas into the Destination Earth digital twin framework. The aim is to develop a new digital twin infrastructures at the core: simulation, data fusion, and supporting software infrastructures for high-performance computing and data handling can be seamlessly integrated with the Destination Earth platform components. These infrastructures should optimally support the scientific and technical performance of the entire digital twin ecosystem of Destination Earth. Okay, and then here you have the biodigital twin. So I was just reading something from the European Union, NTT Innovating is a Japanese company that actually works closely with Israel. But what if we could have a virtual copy of ourselves to prevent diseases and help us live longer, healthier lives? The future is within our reach. Biodigital twins predict disease before it happens. So the Japanese company here, they have a project, I guess, for what they call biodigital twins, but I'm just kind of trying to show people fact is it goes beyond policy horizons in Canada or innovation Israel. It's a worldwide agenda, and the coerced medical procedures, if you will, were nothing more than a sideshow. And in the times of crises, whatever that might entail, even climate change type of false flag crap, these people use this as an opportunity to either push out more tech or something revolving around this biodigital convergence agenda, whether it be a direct or indirect or even construction projects for, say, smart cities, right? So these are the list of specialties that this company works on, which are all basically biodigital convergence subjects, if you will. And these are their locations that they have, from Singapore, Prague, London, New York, and in Sydney as well, and in Poland and Japan. So they're all over Europe, Asia, and as well in New York. So this is IOWN, the Innovative Optical and Wireless Network, is an initiative for networks and information processing infrastructure, including terminals that can provide high-speed, high-capacity communication utilizing innovative technology focused on optics, as well as tremendous computational resources. This is done in order to overcome the limitations of existing infrastructure with innovative technologies, optimize the individual with the whole based on all available information, and create a rich society that is tolerant of diversity. Yeah, right. We have started R&D with the aim and finalizing specifications in 2024 and realizing the initiative in 2030. And so you could see digital twin computing here once again. So that's just to show kind of the dangers of those digital avatars that people create on Facebook. You're actually doing these tech companies a favor, is what you're doing. So, and plus, I must say, I think that your natural faces look more beautiful and natural anyway. So, stick with that. And then here they have a laboratory in Israel. So, like I said, they're working hand in hand with them. And I'll be leaving links in the description to any one of my biodigital convergence type videos, and for any sort of references that I make, especially as I make many to the Asmin and such here. So this video, this basis with this Ian guy, Omari Taylor, who's a DJ in Toronto, and then of course Kellyanne Wolf. They're talking, and Kellyanne does about 70 to 80% of the talking, and about 20 to 30% of the talking is Ian, and Omari says almost nothing besides sitting there like, duh. But anyway, they're talking about phones and using blockchain technology, and they're working on an app that will provide every Canadian the ability to govern themselves from their phones, supposedly, and it is going to be using the blockchain. And apparently Kellyanne Wolf says that there needs to be independent candidates in Canada right away, and that essentially there's no need for political parties, right? So Ian makes a remark that you can't trust the existing system, and you do need a new system. So I'll agree with that much at face value, but you know, as Kellyanne Wolf is basically wants this app to be something where you veto government policy, because essentially she wants to have political parties eliminated, and because they're the root of everyone's problems. So she says it's actually the Knights of Malta and the Jesuits that puppet various institutions, including politicians, but nice attempt at gatekeeping there. Foreign and corporate interference, she says, fund and pay political parties in exchange for intrusion on our laws, policies, expansion, and profit. Yeah, that's true in and of itself, of course. And she says as well that the WHO and WEF couldn't come into this country, and that pharma companies wouldn't be able to force the on people unless politicians allowed them to. Okay, no, like again, all the most like influential people happen to be from either royal families or happen to be part of different fraternal institutions that lead their way through the Vatican, whether that be the Society of Jesus, better known as the Knights of Malta. I mean, sorry, the Society of Jesus, better known as the Jesuits, or you have the Knights of Malta, typically speaking. So, speaking of which here, Kelly is part of something called the ASMIN, right, which is a group where you purchase this pass and you claim to be Métis. And the ASMIN are part of what is called the Alliance of Indigenous Nations, AIN, and one of the particular nations that is part of the Alliance of Indigenous Nations are the Knights Hospitallers, which otherwise are known as the Knights of Malta. And many of the high-ranking people within the ASMIN are either Knights Hospitallers themselves or Freemasons, and they're involved in green projects, sustainable development projects, the United Nations, the EU, telecommunications, aviation, construction, engineering, etc. And all of the Alliance of Indigenous Nations support UNDRIP, the Paris Agreement, and as well NESARA. And so when you take into NESARA the fact that they basically use the term the Great Awakening, like a lot of the QAnon people, which is the same thing as the Great Reset, by the way. It's just like red and blue politics. With NESARA, JASARA, they talk about a debt jubilee and returning to precious metals as a new currency and using a currency that is backed by these precious metals. Well, and they claim to be wanting to use something called the quantum financial system, which is just another way of saying the blockchain, and that's exactly what they're developing here, and that's exactly what digital identity companies partner with, are blockchain firms. So essentially, with our Sestri KV trusts that were created at birth in our name, there's plenty of finances and stuff like that attached to it, and so anytime we sign a signature or our name is written in capital letters on pieces of ID, which are not us, the person, if you will, that is just basically money that is chipped away from the Sisterhood KV Trust and value taken out of that. And so the debt jubilee that is spoken about in NESARA JASARA, you know, apparently this money that is owed to us or whatever, it's actually basically a reversal, and all debt that these dark forces actually owe to us are abolished. Not all debt is abolished in general. So this is actually how you lead toward a digitalized social credit system, right? And so also there's something attached to the ASMIN called the Love satellite phone that I addressed briefly in another video, and that as well operates on the blockchain. So we can see here that they're pushing for this Web3 type of software, if you will, because this is part of the segue into the biodigital convergence. So essentially, these people want the government overthrown because, you know, you have to take out an existing system. What's part of some of the cycles in history is revolutions, right? And the root of revolution is revolve. So revolutions don't change anything. What happens is one tyrannical regime gets knocked out of power in order to have an even more tyrannical regime take place. And the rebellion and the regime in history are always financed by the same people or same groups of people with common interests. So the rebellion and the regime are really just one and the same. So, and of course, with this app kind of working in a direction of direct democracy, which I've already really explained, this is, again, just really the pathway to tyranny. And, you know, Kelly mentions that through this, you can streamline all the, like, freedom media groups and stuff like that together, but really alternative media, or media anyway. Media was a Greek sorceress that casted illusions, so that's pretty much what that is. Just like pharma or pharmakia, if you will, is where pharma comes from. That means maker of drugs or poisons. So the name of an industry is even just right there at face value. And of course, as well, too, you know, Kelly mentions that there are five different groups that she wants to get together, but she doesn't run through all of these five because I guess she's really scatterbrained from the looks of things in watching this video. She mentions that there is a lawful assertion group to establish provincial committees in every province that are exclusively focused on bringing forth private prosecutions and judicial reviews against parliamentarians on every piece of legislation and act that's written, proposed, or passed that violates the Constitution, even though the Constitution is nothing but a Constitution Act, right? It's an act of Parliament is what it is. And bills and legislation do not really have authority over us, and they always get overridden by think tanks and groups like Policy Horizons anyway. So they're pretty well useless, whether it's the Bill of Rights or the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, right? Charter of No Rights and Bill of Rights as in a sacred rite or ritual. So what happens is with these independent candidates that, with people running as independents that Kelly wants to have set up, they are basically supposed to be probably these provincial representatives or some kind of representative figure of sorts in the grand scheme of things. And so, as well, what happens is Kelly promotes Stand for These package, which I've not really gone through, although she speaks down about Rebecca Shepherd. So, and then you have Richie Marquez, which is apparently a friend of Kelly's. He sought patents for natural resources, so when you walk away from the government of Canada and decide to govern yourselves, what happens is apparently you receive a token that is backed by natural resources and get the gold standard, and you get the gold standard for governing yourself, supposedly, is what's said. Well, if this all runs on the blockchain, one, I've already covered that, and two, if we're factoring in the Thunderbird Party of Adrian's, which I've also covered in another video, I'll be leaving that in the description. With that Thunderbird Party, which they talk about nationalizing resources, then these resources you will not have for yourself at all. They will actually be exclusively controlled by government, and you will be under the thumb of them, and you will be living in a social credit system where you eventually will have your DNA set up as a blockchain node, and you'll be in a social credit system. So, while they don't talk about the DNA portion of it or the biological portion of it, what happens in military operations of sorts, and all operations really within, especially the freedom movement, is information is so heavily compartmentalized, and people are only working on one small portion. Sometimes people are even calling each other out, playing good cop, bad cop, or black hat, white hat, but they're not focusing on the bigger agenda, if you will. It's all about compartmentalizing information, right? So, now I'm going to move forward. I'm just going to mention here that basically January 20th, apparently, that in Queen's Park in Toronto, there's supposed to be a sort of worldwide rally, if you will. Now, I've been talking a lot about Web3 software, so for people that are not really techies, if you will, and I'm really not either, these are different forms of the internet. So Web 1 is read-only web, so you're going on and looking at articles and stuff like that. Web 2 is participative social web, so that's like social media and stuff like that, or YouTube uploading videos and that kind of a thing. And then Web 3 is read, write, execute web. So yeah, that is where you actually include the blockchain into it. And then you even have digital assets, using that term loosely, like when people have on their platforms like the gift option or stars and stuff like that. That is all just part of that process of a Web3 conversion. So now to talk a little bit about UNESCO and their plans for building a internet of trust, if you will. What happens is with their internet of trust, it's blockchain technology, which is Web3, and they want to basically force digital ID on everyone, and it's a token-based economy with a social credit system attached to it. It says that an estimated 60% of the world, that's 4.75 billion people, use social media not just to express themselves and connect with others, but to inform themselves about news and global events. That's one of the leading statistics in UNESCO's new guidelines for the governance of digital platforms, which aim to ensure people retain their rights online and are protected from misinformation, disinformation, hate speech, and conspiracy theories. I would actually just reverse everything that they have said, right? And this is what they call the Internet of Trust. No, it's actually a total control mechanism to hinder free speech, and they determine what's truth. It's basically their big brother, right? Although the UN and even UNESCO, if you will, are just small potatoes in the grand scheme of things, as all roads lead to Rome. Rather, all roads lead through Rome, and all agendas lead through this biodigital convergence thing. So, platforms conduct due diligence on human rights, right, if you say so. So it says that they need to have a system in place to protect human rights, and it says women are more concerned than men about having their personal data misused online and about victims of harassment and abuse. According to the World Wide Web Foundation, journalists can also face abuse and even death threats on social media. So yeah, it sounds like that's just a way to set up, again, a way to control information, right? And a way to determine who needs quote-unquote protection and who does not need quote-unquote protection, right? And as well, what is even harassment in their eyes, especially when these people are determining what pronouns we can and can't use and that sort of a thing as well. You know, you're going to basically be flagged for, you know, hate speech or whatever the case is, or you, again, used insensitive pronoun. This kind of a thing is riddled throughout the Illuminati card game, if you will, to basically, how do I say it? Predictive programming is really just something where ideas sink into people's subconscious and then they bring about the reality, essentially, into play. So these people behind closed doors have no creativity, but they use our emotions and our multidimensional minds, if you will, for their use, because they have no creativity of their own, so they have to rely on people like us to bring about this reality. So they place it in front of us and we enact it, if you will. So evil actually needs good for it to thrive more than anything, right? And also ignorant people. And that's why you have the truck convoy through predictive programming. And this isn't really predictive programming for the event in Ottawa. It's programming of a movement and idea in people's minds. And you have several dress rehearsals from United We Roll to Ottawa to when things were rebranded from Freedom to the Unity events. And then as well, what they call the Nonvoy, if you will, or Save the Children convoy. So, and then you see this guy, he's got a sign that says long haul, so you're in it for the long haul, right? And a lot of people as well, they crave that endorphin rush that they had in Ottawa. And the reality is that, you know, protests are like energy harvesting operations, and they feed off this energy, and they use protests to distract from the bigger picture, because you cannot protest your way out of a new world order, if you will. So you just have to be aware of what it is they are doing, is what you have to be aware of, and you have to speak out against it. And being that the narrative is controlled on both sides, you know, accusing somebody of creating division when you are going to talk about the agenda as is really actually just a way of silencing somebody, no different than using pronouns or under the guise of hate speech. It's just the opposite side of the coin is all. So, of course, you know, they're talking about a need for something inclusive here. You know, platforms adhere to international human rights standards, including platform design, content moderation, and content curation. Yeah, so this is basically almost like a repeat of number one, if you will. And then platforms are transparent, so that has to do with the controlling of information, what they deem to be true, not true, etc. So this video is probably going to get fact-checked for all we know. And then, as well, this talks about, it says platforms make information and tools available for users. Well, more like whatever it is they want to be available, and whatever these tools are can be dull or faulty that they can leave. So, yeah, and then as well, Platforms are accountable to relevant stakeholders. So rules are of no use unless they are followed, and ensuring this happens is the focus of UNESCO's fifth principle. Digital platforms need reporting mechanisms to log policy violations, but given the global nature of their operations, they also need to ensure these mechanisms take into account local cultural sensitivities in the way complaints are handled. They also need to be a special focus on quickly tackling any content that threatens other users, particularly their human rights, or that targets them because of their gender. Special reporting mechanisms are also needed to protect children. Yeah, so again, everything that is said by the UN, I always just flip around like the total law of reversal, if you will, because that is, inclusivity means really excluding everybody and only including those who go along with the given narrative. So just flip everything. And then here is basically, it says the future of blockchain human DNA as new digital wallets. I read this article, or a little bit of it, already in my video that I made about China, and I already kind of touched on this concept throughout the video, but this link will be in the description for people to kind of see, in a little bit more depth, that whole aspect there. And then another thing I just want to say is that people are also thrown a lot of desensitization rituals, if you will, without even realizing it. And so the classic example that we can probably think of is Sound of Freedom, which I've already done videos on. And then as well, when QAnon started to become popular in 2016, through Donald Trump's, fake election between the Clintons and all that. And then as well, by the time Jeffrey Epstein supposedly killed himself or didn't kill himself or whatever, this is all just a big story, like the whole Epstein list and Lolita Island or whatever. All of this is just something to get people hooked and having this notion about this particular term here. I just don't want to say too many vile things and have this video removed. And it also promotes the idea of this so-called deep state, if you will, which is just a vague term that doesn't really describe the foundation or structure of how any of this stuff works. So as far as I'm concerned, this so-called list coming out affiliated with Epstein is just another distraction tool, and also it's just a way of desensitizing us to some element of reality, being that there are sick and sinister things that go on behind closed doors, but the way that they'll present it in the media will be in a very ridiculous and over-the-top fashion. And all Epstein ever did in the public eye, all the story served, was something so that something such as SRA, people can look up that acronym for themselves because I don't want this video taken down. All it did was normalize that SRA concept for people is all it did. So all it did was desensitize people to something, if you will, while not even giving them the real truth of how those things are actually happening. So anyway, I want to thank everybody for watching, and just note that, again, all roads lead through Rome, but all agendas lead toward the biodigital convergence. And if people have questions, I'll happily answer them. They can go in the comments or find me on Facebook at Matt Unseated. Thanks for watching, everyone. Take